Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times, these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
My name is James Charles Campbell Jr. and I joined the department in March 1st, 1982. I retired October 31st, 2012, and I retired the rank of captain. Originally, yes, I was born at West Leon Hospital as far as my background, and I've lived in Greensboro for probably 20 years, and the last 30 years I've lived out in the country in Rockingham County. I was related to a couple over the years. Curtis Gaulden was my brother-in-law, and an older member of the department many years back, Clarence Campbell, he is a distant relative, and he slid the pole and broke his leg and ended up going into communications. I was actually, before I come on to the department, I was actually working for EMS part-time, and I was farming part-time, and I had gone to work with Lord Tobacco Company right before I was hired on the department here. What made me want to become a firefighter? Probably, I told Chief Jones in my interview, he asked the same question, and I told him I liked the days off. And he kind of laughed, but I was just kidding. I was already involved in the volunteer department in the county, and everything about it I thoroughly enjoyed, and I thought that's something I'd want to do. When I was hired, the process that we went through, I remember Clarence Hilliard, Chief, he was the one that took me through my little physical agility test, and I was all ready to go, and we were going to have to run from the old facility down to the tower, the old tower. So he said, hurry up, hurry up. So I started trotting, and he said, slow down, I can't keep up. So we ended up walking all the way to the tower, and then when we got down there, the rope wasn't there for me to hang out the window, and he said, well, don't worry about it. And I said, okay, and it went pretty well. The physical agility, the basic, that part was our first process. And then if you made it through the physical agility, you went next door and you were interviewed by some of the assistant chiefs. And at that time, I went to work with the tobacco company, Lord. And Chief Jones, Frank Jones, was in there and part of the interviewing process, and he wanted to know if I still got a free pack of cigarettes every day. And I said, all employees did, and I said, yeah. And he said, have you got it with you? Because I had to leave Lord to come for my interview, and I was 10 minutes late for my interview because I had to come straight from work. And Chief Kent kind of, he scolded me. Did I not have a watch? Could I not tell time? And I told him, I couldn't. It's the old saying, you can't give up something you got in your hand over here hoping in the other hand. I had a job, and I wasn't going to get fired from that job, hoping I'd get a job here. And that's when Chief Jones hit me up with the cigarette question, and he took my pack of cigarettes, and he said, until you leave there, I want a pack for every day. My starting salary, the best I can remember, it was in the teens, the upper teens, I guess, maybe around 2000. To be honest with you, I don't know. It wasn't much.
Okay.
It wasn't much at all.
That's fine.
We didn't come for the money. Probably our training class and the challenges that it was presented to probably me and the bulk of us was most of us didn't come from the computer generation. And our class, we couldn't even use a calculator. So working all of our math questions and stuff, it was really something to see everybody counting on their fingers and patting their feet and their toes, you know. And myself and Wayne Henderson were the two biggest guys in training. Well, they were making us in the mornings for PT to carry. You had to carry a guy on your back like the old fireman's carry and run the 50-yard dash. And if you lost, you and your partner went and got back in line again. And you kept racing till either you won or you were the last two standing. And Wayne was very comical because I would be carrying Wayne and he would be hollering at the other two running, if you beat us, we're going to stomp you, you know. And that was right comical. In my training class, Kenny Stanley probably went about as high as anybody in my class, and Steve Zimmerman, Wayne Arnold, Roger Brooks, a guy named Ingram. He didn't stay very long, and he left the department. You know, several guys I went to school with, but as far as probably Chief Stanley went the highest out of our class. Well, personally, probably the funniest story for me personally was probably 2/3 of the way through training. I was late for work. I overslept. Drove like a madman to get to being late for training. And I walked into the where we were doing our physical fitness, and everybody, the guys in there was like, oh, shame, 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 you had it. I didn't even stop. I went straight to Chief Jones's office, and he kind of looked at me and he said, what's up? And I said, I'm late for work. And he said, late for work? And I said, yeah, do you want to hear the truth or the story that I've got made up? And he said, the story would probably be better, but I ain't got time. And I said, I'm late because I overslept. And he said, well, get out there and get caught up. And that was the end of it. But Chief Cox, it was Captain Cox then, he wanted to know what my story, my lie was. So I told him, and that was a big joke for probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. Probably the thing that made me most likely feel special as far as being on the department would be probably one of the first things was we actually had a structure fire, and the people that were home were there, their home, they were present. And the way they were so appreciative. The house burned up, so much damage and so much loss, but they were so appreciative of what we were doing that it just, you know, I'd never seen any other job where people thanked you, and I'm looking at it like, your house burned up. You know, why are you being thankful to us? It should be your job. Jerry Price, Station 8. That was my first assignment. And I stayed at Station 8 for 8 years. And then moved. I followed the hazmat team because my first assignment was Engine 8 and the hazmat truck had just been put in service. A 1958 American France with an open cab. So if it was raining, you could stand up and look over the windshield and see better than you could looking through the glass because the wipers were air operated and they'd only swipe about twice a minute. So, you know, that tells you how far hazmat has come in, you know, 40 years, I guess. The hazmat truck was an American France, 1958, and Station 8, the Engine 8, was a Han, you know, snubbed over cab, and probably the greatest thing, I guess, of old Engine 8, it was the only truck in the city that remained red. You know, when we went and painted all of them that yellow, and 8 held out, and it never was painted yellow. It stayed red, you know, and that was the only truck left. And they quit doing it, you know, and it was a good I could see. They said yellow was a great color because there were fewer yellow vehicles involved in accidents. Well, there wasn't but probably 2 or 3 of that ugly yellow color on the road to start with, you know, so. Couple things about Price. He was as unique an individual as I'd say I've ever met. You know, he was smart, and he would teach a class. You would think we were at a college, and it was. I mean, you took notes, you sit up, and you know, and that type thing. But then a couple hours later, he'd be telling you some crock and bull story you knew wasn't true, and he would just, I think he run a test on us all the time. Is the way he approached things. My nicknames were varied. One, early years, Chief Jones, Charlie Jones, he called me Otis on kind of Otis Campbell on TV. That was the best he could come up with. And then as time went on, a bunch of the guys called me the Grim Reaper because as far as the death and fire deaths and incident, I'd been to more than you could ever imagine, so they called me the Grim Reaper. And that wasn't a good nickname, but it stuck, Well, we done practical jokes at the station, all kinds. Probably some of the funnier ones was a guy named Brad Smith. He left the department, and he got married and went on his honeymoon. And while he was gone, we had the old metal lockers. We got into an empty locker and took 3 lockers apart so we could get to his locker. And we took his pants out and took them to a seamstress, and she took his pants up 1 inch in the waist. And we put them all back in the locker and put the lockers back together. We wasted a day doing it. So when he come back from his honeymoon, we sat in on it saying, "You look like you gained a lot of weight on your honeymoon." And then when he went to put his pants on, he couldn't get, they were so tight, he couldn't get them to fit. Well, he said, "I don't know what's wrong," and the captain was in on it, and he said, "Can I get some emergency requisition for some pants?" And they said, "Yeah, but you won't be able to get no more till this year runs out." Okay, so he ordered a pair of pants 1 inch bigger in the waist than what he normally wore. So when he got back with those pants, he couldn't even keep them up, and he had them all. He never figured that out, and we never told him. Jim Wallen. Jim was eating somebody if you was ever around him. He smoked, 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and he eat 4 quarter pounders with cheese if you stopped at McDonald's. And Jim's heart rate was about 60 at the highest, and he worried about nothing at all. And he'd go eat, and he'd put his food on his plate, and we'd take food off, and we took a yellow sponge, a square yellow sponge, and we got a can of ice, and we iced that sponge so it looked like vanilla, white cake, the yellow inside of and with a white icing on it. And we put it in the refrigerator, and I don't know, it's probably Charlie was involved. We told him that don't mess with that cake. We're gonna all eat some a little later with ice cream. And Jim went in there looking all around, didn't see anybody, and he got a knife and he went to cut the cake. Well, we were watching because we knew, and that cake would sit there on the plate, and when he'd cut it, it would roll over, and then it would come back up because we had it glued to the plate, the cake was. And he started out with just a table knife, just a simple butter knife type. Well, then he got a steak knife out, and then he still couldn't cut it with a steak knife. Well, he figured something was up, so he took his finger and looked around and tasted the icing, and it was good. So he went back to sawing on that cake again to finally he figured it out, And so in the jokes, I was a big jokester, and I kept something going all the time. C.J. Woody and a bunch of them were in the kitchen one night, and how you stand around and talk, and I got to tell them about a pony that I had bought for my son called Midnight. And I got to tell them and just rolling on with the story. Well, it was about 4. They were all laughing so hard, tears running down their face, And I think it was either C.J. or Rick Cross, one or the other, kind of wet their pants. They were laughing so hard, it was so funny. So, I tried to make it. I tried to keep things as lighthearted as we could because there was enough bad and seriousness that we saw that we had to deal with. So that was me. As far as my crews and us eating and how we function on a daily basis, I was a firm believer that a good company ate together, and that meant cooking and taking turns and being part of it. I just think that it's not the same. If you didn't eat, there was a few times where the guys said they were going on a diet and they weren't going to eat with you, and it really changed a lot of stuff as far as cooking. One interesting thing, he said, like jokes and cooking, had a new guy. He come on station, young fella, 19 years old, never cooked before in his life, and he didn't know what to do. And I said, we're going to do something special. we're going to let you fix spaghetti. It's very simple. You can't go wrong. So I give him his shopping list, what he needed, and I had hamburger, 5 pounds, 2 boxes of noodles, you know. Well, he left. He went in his personal vehicle, went and got the groceries, and that was in that era where we were saving gas. You couldn't drive a fire truck, you know, so he was gone, and he was gone. I started getting worried. I thought, well, what in the world is happening to this kid? Well, his phone rung, and it was him. And he asked me, he said, Captain, I've been to 3 grocery stores, and I cannot find any hamburger. All they got is ground beef and ground chuck. So I said, I'll tell you what, get some of that ground beef, and I will make it work. And then when he come back, 2 or 3 of them had heard me talking to him, and I don't think he ever lived that down. You know, that stayed with him. How much meals costed on a daily basis was really unique. When I first come on, I went out a few times and worked with a Captain O'Farrell down at, you might have been at station 48, new numbers, 48. And you know, he was big, he was thrifty with money, and he said he had brought in some tomatoes and vegetables out of the garden. And he sent me to the store for dinner that night, and he said, whatever you do, don't spend more than $4 for the meal, entire food, you know. He would say, we're going to have fried tomato stems and green beans in a paper bag, and it's not going to cost you but 90 cents to eat today. But that was the cheapest I'd ever ate. But probably the average, it ended up being about $7 a day towards the end of my career. Was I a good cook? Yeah, sometimes. I used to fix fried chicken, and I'd fix potato salad, kind of your basic country food, and everybody really liked it, and they liked the fried chicken, you know. But there were a lot of the folks later in my career, they were young, they were on the health nut kick. So if you said we're going to have country style steak and gravy and creamed potatoes, oh, they'd go off. You know, they were wanting steamed broccoli, and the walk-by beef, and walk-by beef is it's sitting on the table, you don't eat it, and you just walk by and keep on going and don't look at it, you know. So I cooked. I didn't get a lot of complaints, but everybody's going to complain. Good question whether dorm rooms or private cubicles, and what I dealt with and how they worked. Started out the big open bedroom, and we all slept in the big room right there together. And when I retired, we had graduated. I had my own bathroom, my own bedroom, and I don't know. I enjoyed the cubicle, the open, everybody, and you know, everybody was in the room together, and so much has been done. You quit eating together, you sleep in your little cubicle, and you don't really see that closeness of the group like you used to. You know, as far as I don't know, you know, all the jokes and so many of the world problems was handled at night when everybody would go to bed and talk about it in the bedroom. And now if they're in a cubicle and there's somebody's telling them to cut the TV down or cut your light off, so it's a different world, yeah. I know when retired firefighters like to come and visit the station, and you're working, you're busy, it would be easy for you to ignore them or just spend a very minimum amount of time. But I think that's you need to stop, because what you don't realize is in a few years that shoe's going to be reversed. And you're going to be that guy that comes into the station, and none of these guys know you. Oh, he's some retired old dude, whatever. But if you would sit down and listen, that guy that's been retired can really teach you, and you can get a wealth of information. I remember Frank, I can't remember, guy I worked with down at 11 for a little bit.
Frank Fortune.
Yes, Frank. And, you know, he would come in there, and Frank, you know, guys would learn their territory and stuff, streets, and Frank would come along and he'd say, I ain't sure about, and I'd say, Frank, you know where that street is? And Frank would say, yeah, I got it. So you never really believed it. But when we get dispatched on a call and we'd be going to 1492 Jones Street or something, Frank say, it'll be a brick house and got red trim on it, and the master bedroom's the 3rd door down the hall. So we would be on Frank. Frank, how do you know so much about that house? Oh, they go to our church. Or I go with him. We fish a lot together. So that, you know, talking about that in the bedroom, that's the bedroom talk. And, you really see, you couldn't take his experience away. You say, well, he's not this and not that. But in 25 years, he's done whatever it is we're getting ready to do on this call. And if we're getting ready to do the same thing they did 25 years ago, he can say, whoa, we done that. It was the biggest flub we ever done. So those old guys and, guys that you see now are a walking book of information. And if you'll just prod them a little bit, you can really pick up on some stuff. Really, my first call that I had on Greensboro was real odd because in training, I was still in training, and they were giving the captain's promotional test and how the guys would leave the station. Well, they were needing some bodies to fill in, so they took all of us recruits and backfilled us in the stations where guys were going to take the test. And of all the stations, if you were going to pick what station in the city would be most likely to get a call within the next 3 hours, it sure wouldn't have been Station 12 on Pisgah Church Road. And that's exactly where I went, and I run the only call out of our whole class that had went 2 stations, and it was supposed to have been a car fire on Longdale Drive, and we didn't find it. But that was my very first call. My very first fire, I was with Jerry Price, Captain Price, and we went over off of Florida Street on a house fire. And it come in as a odor investigation. And when we got there, the fire was blowing out the front door and the windows, and so that was probably I'm pretty sure that was my first actual structure fire. Most of the calls that have, I guess, had a lasting effect on me and it's kind of been etched in my memory, it was more the worst calls, the bad calls. And a lot of the calls where we really made a big difference, they slip away. But I had one where a child died. I'm talking, 3 weeks old, and it wasn't a fire, it was a medical call, and it ended up the father was responsible for the child's death, and the child was there. And I could still, it ain't many days I don't go by that somehow that call it'll be in the back of your head. And I had a call, I had made captain, and I was being transferred down to Station 11. I'm going to be on the engine, and it was a 6 o'clock in the evening transfer, and I had showed up with all my stuff, walked in the station, just put my gear on the floor, and we got a call to Interstate 85, and it just rung off everything could be wrong. Vehicle accident involving tractor trailer and a car, vehicles on fire, woman trapped inside. And when we pulled out the door, you could see the flame, and the smoke. You could see it in the sky. And when we got there and pulled up, after it was over, the lady that died, her husband was driving a truck. He was a truck driver, and he had stopped, and he about snatched me out of the door when we stopped. And he said, "My wife's in there. Please God help her." And and we got off, and in my mind, there was a tractor trailer sitting there burning. The cab of the tractor was burning. So you kind of assume here he's a truck driver. His wife, I thought, was in the sleeper. And so we went up there, and Wayne Delancey, I think he'd just come out of training, but he had some experience for the fire service, and we went straight to the truck. And he opened the door of the truck, and I picked him up and shoved him up in there, and I said, "Check the sleeper." And the fire was coming on us, but we was moving pretty quick. And he said, "There ain't nobody in it." Well, I had to let him down, and I picked him back up, and I said, "She's got to be in the passenger seat." And she wasn't there. And we had opened the driver's door, and I thought, well, and they were coming with a line. I said, "Just knock it down." And then when it just floored me, because the truck driver, where's his wife? And then I got to looking, and the tractor was sitting on top of a car, and his wife was in the car. And that story she had carried him to work, and he worked at one of the trucking terminals down there off of near Pinecroft, and she had dropped him off. He had gotten his truck. She was following him back home. They lived off of Randleman Road, and the truck that actually hit her come from behind. And he was going so fast that he hit her, and she hit her husband's truck and kind of bounced off, and then he rode up on her, and he surfed her vehicle down the highway for like 100 and some yards. And you know, that stuff like that. And there was a lot of the bad calls that I remember, and I probably remember a lot less of what you would say were the calls that had the great outcome. The fire station. How do you deal with the calls where something bad happens? And I said a firefighter's built-in mechanism is we make lighthearted of so much stuff, because if you took everything dead serious every day, all day long, it would drive you crazy. So I said, you see firemen and they get back to the station, you would never, and they may be cracking jokes. I mean, you know, you think now funny stuff. And I told them, I said, good example. I said, we went on an unlawful burning call one day, and I said, we got there, it was some homeless men, and they had a fire going, but he had a pot on top of the fire. Well, theoretically, I said, if they're cooking, they can do it. And I went over and asked him, what is he doing? And he said, he's fixing some hot dog weenies for lunch. And I kind of looked over the pot, and the water was pretty dirty, you know. And I said, well, okay. And he looked at me just as serious as he could be. He said, and I'm washing my underwear. And I looked, and he had a little metal prong. I don't know what, it wasn't a fork or spoon. And he dipped down in there and pulled up a pair of underwear and dropped them back in there. And I could see the hot dog weenies in there. And he said, you want a hot dog? And I said, no, we just ate. I'm full. I'm good to go. Some of the bigger fires and multiple alarms that I went on, Davie Street, I was on that call. Some of the gasoline tankers that wrecked down on the interstate down in Death Valley, you know, I was on those. Northeast Shopping Center, we showed up over there. Coming from the other side of town, we were kind of getting, you know how that is when you come, the fun part's over and you're mop up and clean up and babysit. But Davie Street, that was, you know, I'd been on a few years, and that call was just unbelievable as far as that type of call. And when we had, you know, we had some pretty big houses. We had a couple of businesses out off of the interstate that, you know, go in and it's just pitch black smoke, and you really get to doubting yourself and what's, you know, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And you get to thinking, and it ain't, you know, where you go in a house and you drop down, put a right hand on the wall, and you follow the wall to get around. Well, if the building's, you know, 1 million square feet, either way I go, unless I come up on the door pretty quick, I'm not getting out. So the fire wasn't nearly as much as the smoke, and you're going off into the deep unknown, and whether you're going to come back out or not. Biggest hazmat call, I guess we'd phrase the question, who was it the biggest to? The worst hazmat call I went on was over here off of White Street where the chlorine plant was, and they had a chlorine tank leaking gas. And we went in and parked up on top of the hill and was getting ready, and one of the chief officers at that time told us to go down the hill and get down there close to the building. And we didn't really want to go, but our captain, he said, well, and the chief was pretty adamant about us going. We ended up down the hill a little closer than we should have been. The wind shifted, and I was being suited up in a suit, and when everybody seen the cloud coming, they run. Well, I was standing there and I couldn't do nothing, so when the chlorine hit me, I went down for the count. And I was laid out there on the ground. I couldn't tell you exactly what, and everybody had run back up to the top of the hill. Well, I don't forgot now. I can't remember. It was two guys that come running down there. It kind of shifted, the wind had changed. And they drug me up, and I was transported to the hospital, and I lost a certain percentage of my lung capacity due to being burned on that call. So that was a big call to me. It was just a leaking tank, you know, and you know, we had the radiation incident from Cone Hospital, the source that was took and never come back. And that went on for weeks. And we had the radiation source that was at the old Army-Navy store, and it was some canisters, and it had a little bit of residue in the canisters. You know, but probably the hazmat-wise, it would be, I don't know, we had the bank call, interesting call out off of West Market Street. All the bank employees, they're sick, they're coughing, it's terrible, and it come from the money. And a lady had brought a bag of money in cash for their daily deposit. Well, when they put the money and took it out of it was in a cloth bag. And when they took it out of the bag and put it in the money counter, it started counting those bucks through, and a cloud started coming off of the money. Well, everybody panicked in the bank. They were all outside. The first couple companies that come in, we ain't going in, we'll wait on hazmat. So when we got there, you know, there's people over here that are sick and dying, don't know what to do, and it was just awful. And guys went in, they carried some meters, and I told them what we needed to do, and they did it and called back, and they said, we're not getting any hits on anything. And I said, well, did you see it? He said, it looked like they hadn't dusted maybe, in a day or two. And come to find out, the bag had beans in it. And the lady that was making the deposit, her and her husband owned several of the convenience stores. So her ancestry was from Western. And she had put the money in that bag, and it was a certain kind of beans that they buy for religious reasons, and it was bean dust is all it was in that bag. So the 3 employees that were transported to the hospital, one GPD officer, he was overcome from bean dust, and it was just, you know, symptomatic type thing. And it was a Friday too. I mean, you can't go wrong on a Friday if you get off a couple hours early to go home, I guess. I don't know. I would say folks that had a big bearing on me, I guess I looked up to in my career to start with, at the very first, it would have been my first 3 captains, because they were so uniquely different in their management skills, their personalities, what they believed in, and it kind of opened my eyes that this place is made of a smorgasbord of all kinds of people. And I said, you know, everybody's not going to be like you, and you're not going to be like them. So that had a big bearing. It was Captain Price, it was Captain Shoemate at that time, and then it was Captain Dave Sharp. And like I said, they had a big bearing. Now as I got older, Captain Parrish, Randy Parrish then, he was a reserved, cut up and picked, but he had a real dry sense of humor, you know. And I don't know, Chief Jones, after I got on, Frank Jones, he took a liking to me, and he talked and carried on. If we were out somewhere, he would come up and talk to me generally, and if somebody else come up, he would put his chief face back on, you know. And so I'd asked him some stuff, and some of the officers, we had some folks that had a negative bearing, you might say, on you, made you really on the offensive, and so it wasn't all good. And those individuals had as big a probably outcome of my career, even though they were more of a negative type person. It made me work at it a little harder, maybe. When I get to thinking about the deaths and things that have happened to the other firefighters and how it affects me, I actually knew a firefighter Gray, who died in 1969. I was a kid, but you know, he was killed in an incident with a fire truck, and that kind of weighed on me when I come on. Now, this job isn't all fun and games. It can be serious. And Jackie Spoon. It was Jackie worked the day before me, and we rode the same truck down in 11. So when I would come in each day, I would relieve him, and we would talk and transfer information, and then I would pick at Jackie because he was ready to retire. He was ready to leave way before his time. He was tired of the fire department. He wanted to do something else, but he knew he had to hang on, and I would pick at him on a daily basis. I ain't got but 2 more years, so I'm going to retire. How long you got? And he'd shut up, and that final morning, when I come in, I relieved him, and then the next day, he had that mowing incident, and I'd been picking at him, and he told me, he said, I wish I was like you, because I'd give anything if I could get out of here and retire. And that was the last words that we said to each other, and then I had to go in his room and pack up his belongings, and get it all together for his daughter, who was going to come by and pick it up. So that was a lot of hands-on, for me. would I do it all over again? The big picture, and what would I do different if I do anything different? You know, you sit here and there's no doubt in my mind that I would be more than happy to do it over again. I was miserable for the first year I retired. You retired. I retired because I needed to retire. My health was getting worse, and it was just time to move on. And I didn't put as much effort into the promotional steps, and I think I could have maybe went up and become a battalion chief, But money-wise, and being on the hazmat team my entire career, I was making, pretty good money compared to or more money than some of the battalion chiefs. And so then it becomes, well, why would I do that? And in the early years, when I should have been going to school and doing this and that other, I was spending time with my family and with the kids, and I don't regret any of that. So I wouldn't trade what I did compared to saying, well, if I'd have done this and done that, I might have moved. I wouldn't trade a thing. I don't think. I'm happy with the way things turned out. Well, when I retired, let's see, things that I've done. About the first year, I didn't do a whole lot, and then I went to work with the Guilford County Sheriff's Department, and I dealt with the fleet, the vehicles, and some of the driving training and getting things. I worked there 7 years with the Sheriff's Department, and I'd worked here over 30-some years, and then went there for 7 years, and then here not too long ago, I just said, I've had enough. I'm done, no more work, public work, and we got a place at the beach, and the grandkids love to go, and we love to take them. And now it's playtime from here on, as far as I'm concerned. I think the roles of the firefighters in the fire service, what they were when I come on to what they are now, there's a big change. When I come on, it was a limited amount of things that you were really required. You had to know your territory, and you were evaluated on that, so that was very important. And all of your basic stuff, how to tie your knots, how to do the basic things, that was hounded even years after you come out of training, because we had more limited amount of responsibility. And now, when the firefighter, look how more extensive training is compared to our training. So I think there's a lot more expected of the younger and the newer firefighter, with all the things that he has to perform and do when he comes in the station. I think he's more advanced than we were when I come on. Somebody after the most that probably for the average firefighter and to be successful, or what you think would be successful, is when he retires or whenever it would be kind of like myself. He has a good firefighter is somebody who enjoys coming to work every day. He enjoys what he does, and it's not a job. It is a career. It is an adventure, and they stay open-minded through their career and to learn and do and accept more, and no negative, no negative outlook. The positive outlook, and I think that's a big thing. Yes, my family's very important as far as my faith and what my faith. It's everyone those that are faithful in their faith, they know, and and I know, and that either stands out and shines or it doesn't. And then the family's number one. It's right. It's number two. So. My health since I've retired has kind of went downhill, I guess, a little bit. I developed diabetes several years before I retired, and since I retired, I've become more dependent, and the issues that come along with being a diabetic. And just recently, I've had to go on the pump for insulin pump, and that's been a real challenge. But things are getting better, so I can't complain. What would I like for the fire department to remember about me? I don't know, probably my way of maybe teaching and my approach to trying to implement or get things across, what I want to get across and how I approach. A quick example was, Chief Spears, I was teaching a class here in this facility on radiation. And I use an example of BBs and bowling balls. And Chief Spears, to this day, you could ask him, who taught you a class about BBs and bowling balls? Because whenever he'd seen me for a long time, he remembered, and he said nobody could have done that and presented that the way you did. And it's the same with Corey Randall, one of the guys that are on my truck, and he's a battalion chief now. And he told me that it took him 2 or 3 years to figure out when we would do a class in the classroom and I would be asking them something, I could have cared less what the correct answer was. I was looking to see how they handled the question and how they worked the problem, come up with the solution. So I guess that's it. Just, people that know you, they're going to remember what they want of you. I was a cut up, I picked, I played, I was serious when I had to be, and I wasn't scared to call you out if I had, if it was a chief or an assistant chief, and if you had to call you out. So I went that way.
That's good.
What advice would I give a rookie coming on? I guess always stay open-minded and don't back yourself in a corner or in a hole. If you stay open-minded, then you're able to do or perform or learn a lot of stuff that'll benefit you in your career. Don't get stagnant. I would be you've come on, you're the new firefighter. Keep learning. Don't ever quit. Make something out of every day. If you just learn one little new thing, you'll be surprised later in the years just how much you do remember and have retained. As far as what would my family to remember about me, I asked the boys, got 2 boys, and I asked them, year or so ago, what do you think you would remember about me when I'm gone? And both of them simultaneously said, you were strict, you expected a lot out of us, and we never had so much fun. And that's what they told me. So I guess that to this day, they're right by my side. They know we're going to do something fun. And as far as my wife, we've been married pushing 40 years, and that's kind of the exception now instead of the rule. And we're as happy as we've ever been. And so I guess, it's all good. If there's any special messages that I would like to leave to somebody, I guess it would just be a general message. And I'm trying to think, and I guess it's that deal with there's so many people that if I was going to sit here and leave a message to all of them I've thought of, we'd be here tomorrow this time. And is enjoy yourself and do good, and be a good person. And there's more to life in this fire department, and there's not much more in life than the fire department. And you figure that out on your own, and when you do, you'll understand where I'm coming from. That would be my concept, I guess. There's certain people on this department that I really looked up to and had a lot of admiration for those individuals. And I could just start naming them off, but I'd be afraid I wouldn't name all of them off. And there's guys that were firefighters, and I was a captain. And now they are assistant chiefs and deputy chiefs. So, and they carry. You look at them, and those individuals, they were a good example when they were low on the pole. And from what I hear, they're great examples now that they're sitting on the top of the pole. So that's probably, I don't think I could really call everybody out, and then there would be somebody that I would later regret that I didn't call their name out.
In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.